Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Monoxide Podcast. I'm your host, Harris, a.k.a. Monoxide, man of many automotive aspirations. And today we are here at Schwartz Performance. Is that typically what you mostly go by? I always think of chassis.
Yeah, Schwartz Performance. That's it.
Yeah.
And today I'm here with my co-host, Dan, Mr. Gun at Garage.
Yep. How's it going?
Well, sweet. Why don't you go and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. Obviously, you're very well known within the industry, but we do have a couple of youngsters that listen to the show from time to time as well. So just kind of explain what it is you do, and we'll go from there.
Well, I spent most of my career in manufacturing. Incidentally, I was born and raised mostly in Minnesota. You probably know that, but Bemidji.
Yeah.
Anyway, Schwartz Performance, I started the company in 2004, and it started out just, I don't know, Restomods. I always liked that type of car, so started doing that. I had built a 82 Fleetwood Brougham Cadillac in my garage that was a pro touring Restomod type car, and I won the CarCraft Real Street Eliminator shootout. I was on 5 episodes of Hot Rod TV with the car. That was the car that actually really put me on the map. I did it in my garage before I ever had even a thought of starting Schwartz Performance, but the car handled. I would take it to Road America, to track days. I'd give Vipers and Corvettes a hard time on the track. So most people know me by that. Then, I started the business. We started building chassis right away, and now I have my own manufacturing company, and we have 127 vehicle applications for chassis. We just came out with Corvette chassis all the way up to 1982. We were the first to do many things. We were the first to come out with a muscle car chassis that bolted in. Prior to us, there was no bolt-in muscle car chassis manufactured by anyone. So we were the first to do that. We were the first to do a bolt-in full frame for unibody cars. Chevy 2 Novas, Mustangs, Mopars, etc. Others now do that too, but we've been the leader in new ideas and thinking outside the box, I guess. My background is in road racing. I was a pro driver in SCCA and IMSA. I had an FIA license. I set 5 SCCA national track records in 1982. I still race in that Optima series, Optima Ultimate Street Car that you guys are familiar with. And, I love having fun with cars. So I guess that's kind of a little bit of background.
Yeah.
You're a rare breed in which you do the customization side, you make things work, but then you also do the track stuff too, and very well at that, right? I mean, it's not everybody that's able to go out and get championships or set records or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I guess... I like going fast and doing all sorts of things with engine-powered vehicles, and so I've done motocross was my first thing, mainly because it was cheap. You could race for cheap. Back in '74 when I started racing motocross, it was like $6 to enter a motocross race, and it cost you $5 in gas to get there and back. So, and then obviously I got into Corvettes and started doing autocross, and my friend Fletcher Belt invited me to watch him race at Road America at the June Sprints, and then that led to that. And throughout life I've done a lot of different types of speed activities, and I love them all. Motocross is a passion of mine, and I do restore vintage dirt bikes as a hobby, but I love flying through the air. You don't get the same exhilaration with a car as you do flying off a jump on a motocross bike.
It's funny you bring that up, actually. Our first podcast on the way down here, have you looked into nitro cross at all by chance? Seen anything about
I'm aware of it. That's more stunt type stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, so we just had some 2 young guys on where they're young when I'm saying they're young.
Right.
Where they, race and they're doing these crazy jumps with cars and so you kind of have a passion for different varieties of speed then. Is there any of them that kind of strike you as one of your favorites, or is it just kind of come and go?
Well, I think each one has its, things that are exciting about it. I think the car aspect of it, I love being able to, set up the car and make the car work properly. So that's like more of a challenge, I guess. I love going around Road America on my Ducati, hitting 182 miles an hour down the straights, and going through turn one at 110 with my knee grinding on the pavement.
You do that on turn one?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, turn one is about 100-mile-an-hour corner. So
wow.
So anyway, I love that. It's there's a song that says everything that kills me makes me feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that often when I'm riding a motorcycle on the track, because it is dangerous, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you are vulnerable. I mean, we have safety equipment we wear, and, essentially a leather suit with armor in it. And now they have airbag suits that I need to get one of these days. But yeah, it's I like all forms of racing. I guess as I've gotten older now, I've kind of returned to some of my roots of riding dirt bikes in the woods on trails. That's enjoyable to me as well. And, anybody that rode dirt bikes, they started riding trails before they ever went into racing motocross or anything like that. So I like that, and I really enjoy the simplicity of autocross. I did a Corvette Club autocross a couple weeks ago, and, that was kind of the start of my car racing career. 1979, I did National Council of Corvette Clubs, and I won the Midwest Regional Championship. And I did 2 events about a month ago, Corvette Club Autocross, and I ended up finishing second in both events. And with a fresh car, my 73 Vet that I just finished last fall, and I haven't done any events other than that one. So I'm sure I'll be able to win with that car once I do a couple more events with it and get more seat time in it.
Just out of curiosity, you're riding dirt bikes. What brand? What kind of bike you riding?
Well, right now I ride a Mako, a 1981 Mako in vintage motocross, and then I have a Beta 300. I think it's a 2018 Beta 300 two-stroke that I ride mainly in the woods.
Okay.
So I don't really try doing motocross on modern bikes anymore. I had a crash a couple of years ago. It took me quite a few months actually for the bruises to go away and to heal up from.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, I was doing a YouTube video with a professional camera crew, and I flipped the bike over backwards, and the bike landed on my ankle and broke my ankle and my foot. So when I motocross, I race the Mako, the vintage bike, and the modern bike I ride in the woods mostly, trails and things like that.
Okay.
So do you typically lean towards any brand? I notice you do a lot of like GM stuff, Chevy stuff in particular. Do you just find a passion for that, or are you just kind of a passion for everything?
Well, that's an interesting question too. I kind of consider myself, of all the brands, I probably have gravitated more towards Pontiacs. And some might be related to the fact that my dad, who passed away when I was an infant, had a 55 Pontiac that he street raced in northern Minnesota by Black Duck, Minnesota. That's where he was from. And he, they did a lot of drag racing up there on the streets back in that day. And he had a 57 that he bought after later on. But, knowing that, I kind of, paid attention, and I liked Trans Ams and things like that. So that's probably, I guess, but if I look at what I own, I have a car collection right now, and I've got a 92 Trans Am in there. So I've got a variety of stuff. I love all brands, actually. Who can't appreciate like opening the hood of a Mopar and seeing like a giant 426 Hemi, and now we've got one here that's got a 572 Hemi in it. So it's like those big giant old school engines of the days gone by. You got to appreciate that. Even if you're a Chevy guy, you got to appreciate that.
Yeah, I do. I'm not much of a GM guy, but I do appreciate most brands. But I just don't see very many Fords around here. That's the only.
Well, it goes in cycles.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had been here a few months ago, we had a Mercury Cougar, and we had 3 or 4 67 to 68 Mustangs.
Okay.
So they were all notchbacks. We've done a lot of Mustangs, actually. I think we've done more Mustang builds here than Camaros.
Okay.
Quite
That makes
honestly.
me feel a little better, yeah. What would be, so in the Cadillac that you did, said the first one that kind of launched everything, did you put a chassis in that too? Or what was the first car that you built a chassis for?
Well, I think the Cadillac was significant in that no one had ever made a car like that handle. And I did this way before the 94, 95 Impala SS came out. So there was virtually no parts available for it. So I had to find pieces from the junkyard that would fit, and I had to fabricate things. I made my own control arm bushings with Delrin bearings and steel liners so that the control arms would move freely. And I made a lot of my own stuff. I'm a machinist by trade, so I made a lot of my own stuff for that Cadillac. It didn't have our chassis. It had the stock chassis, but I made the car work really well. And so that was kind of the springboard of, making suspension work right. And I think motocross, which required you to adjust, shock absorbers and forks, the damping, compression damping, rebound, the amount of preload, the spring rates, all that kind of stuff. Motocross taught me those basic mechanics that, transfers to automobiles. So the first car that I did a chassis on for myself was well after we started manufacturing chassis. Probably the 65 Tempest and my 81 twin turbo Trans Am were the first two cars that we built as shop cars. The Trans Am made 1,040 rear wheel horsepower, by the way.
Wow.
And that was I'm trying to think of how long ago that was.
I was going to ask that.
Quite a long time ago. Probably, we're 24 now. That was probably 15 years ago.
So way before 1,000 horsepower was standard, which it seems to be kind of now today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no downpipes in a tune back then.
No.
So there's a few different directions we could take this. So one of the ones that comes to mind, especially when you get to this caliber of shop, right? Especially when you start early on, when you're doing everything yourself, when you're creating a business, what was the timing, or when did the realization happen that you wanted to add more people to your team?
Well, when I started the business, I figured that I could probably have two to three of us total, myself and a couple of guys. And I thought we could probably do about $1 million in sales, and I could pay myself maybe $100,000 a year, and that was kind of my thought process. So my 5-year goal was to do $1 million in sales, and make $100,000 profit. And I met the sales goal in 3 years. It took me probably 10 years to meet the profit goal, but anyway. One of the things was that I realize now is I didn't set my goal high enough, and I had to continually raise the bar and raise my goal because I achieved it early.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first customer car?
The first customer car was a Dodge Dart, and it was Richard Weiss Jr. from the Baltimore area, and I was given the job by Jimmy Day, who runs the Optima series.
Oh, okay.
So, long story, but he was running a shop, and he was the project manager for that project for the customer, and there was some conflict with the shop he was working, so he became a freelance and continued managing the project for that customer, and it ended up getting subcontracted to me because I was the only one stupid enough to take on the project with the goal of getting it done in like 9 weeks or something like that.
Was there at any point, like as you were continuing to scale, or again when you were adding people to your team, did you find yourself having all the skill sets that you needed, or did you kind of have to be like, all right, well, this guy's really good at this, I want him on my team because he can do it better than me? Or did you feel like you covered most of those bases?
Initially, I covered most of those bases, but very early on, I had one of my friends who was restoring a B-17 bomber with his brother, and they had to make many parts. The plane had been cut in half, and he had to make many parts from scratch, make wooden bucks and hammer like aluminum stampings over wooden bucks to make them look like they were punched out on a press. And so he started with me on the very first job, and he's still with me today. So I would say his skill set of fabricating sheet metal was far beyond my capabilities. And then I can weld, but as time went on, I found people that could TIG weld way better than I could. So yes, I did have the need for that, and I think the two guys that I got that started with me initially, one was like a really good TIG welder, and the other one was a fabricator of sheet metal. So that's what was two skills that they were a little better than me.
Now, I see there's a lot of projects going on here. Some of them, the paint on these things is gorgeous. Do you guys do that in-house, or you have a body shop you work with, or?
Well, we have a paint booth here, and we've done probably close to a dozen cars where we've painted them in-house. But I've had difficulty with getting skilled help that can do that type of work in a timely fashion to the quality level that we have. So I have several sources that I use, that I subcontract paintwork to, and one is in Wisconsin and a couple of them are in Illinois, and so far that's worked pretty well for us.
Yeah, because I don't know if they go to your website or anything like that, and you guys have this chassis thing nailed down, but you're not just building chassis. You guys are doing full up from the ground builds.
Yes, when I started the business, we were doing performance upgrades, putting disc brake kits on old cars, vintage air, adding air conditioning, doing upgrade type stuff. We were also, me being a machinist, I was actually building engines for people. I had friends that had the machining equipment needed to, balance a crankshaft or bore out an engine block. Mm-hmm. And I was doing all the assembly. I would dyno test the engines on various dynos that I had access to. So I was doing engines, chassis, upgrades, all pretty much everything related to this. I even did some late model performance stuff. I did a turbo kit on a late model truck and a supercharger install on a late model truck, and I did everything. But then as we got busier, then we became a little more specialized in trying to focus on what we do best. Now mm-hmm. that we've got the chassis where we have so many different applications, and that's always been when we started doing chassis, it was literally about 20 years ago, and initially those were being subcontracted, and then in 2009 or 10 I ended up buying out the chassis company and brought all the jigs in-house, and one of the employees came to work for me, and initially I rented space from them in Janesville, Wisconsin, and was building our chassis in Janesville. And then after a couple months, I moved it to Woodstock, where we were at that time. So, it's been kind of a wild ride.
Being from Bemidji, what brought you down here?
At the time, I was 16 years old, and I had just finished a sophomore year in high school in Long Prairie, Minnesota. That's where we lived at the time. And we lived in a trailer park on the north side of town. But my mom was in a relationship with a man, and he got a job down here, and she basically packed us up and moved down here. It was kind of hard because, you were at that age of 16 when you had a girlfriend, so I had to leave her behind and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's how I ended up here, is my mom moved here. And then, a few years later, I went and visited some of my friends in Long Prairie, Minnesota, and every one of them were alcoholics, and all they did was go to the bar and drink every night. It was like, and I look back at, when I visited, I think it was probably 1984 that I went and visited. So it was like 10 years after I'd left. And I thanked my mom for dragging me out of that, out of that deal. So, small town, rural America, it's not just Minnesota, it's just any small town, rural America. It's, I guess it's too easy to get into that habit.
Yeah. Not a lot of speed shops popping out from places like that.
No. And somebody asked me one time, like, I drank as a teenager and did, some
Teenager
partying
type
in
things.
my young adult life, but, I don't really drink anymore at all. And it's like, people ask me, like, why don't you drink? And it's like, I have no problem with it, but I don't really feel, I have so much fun in my life that I don't really feel like I need to alter my mind to have a good time. Like, I don't need a drink to make me relax so I can have a conversation with people. You know what I mean? So,
Well, it seems like you're drunk on adrenaline too.
well, I guess there's some of that, but I think, once you've done this for so many years, I don't really think your body releases a whole lot of adrenaline unless it's a oh shit moment. You know what I mean?
Are you a competitive guy then by nature?
Yes. Very competitive.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of crazy brainchilds in here. I think that's a good way of putting it. I really like that Elephant 68 Charger. That's, again, I grew up Mopar, so that's kind of where my head immediately goes to. But tell us a little bit about this crazy idea behind you, because it's a Hellcat in a Hellcat motor in a Corvette. So where did this come from, and how do we get to this point?
Well, I guess...
Before we get too far into the show, I wanted to take a moment to talk about Raise a Hood. If your daily driver is having issues, aka your beater you got off Craigslist, Raise a Hood's telemechanics and AI tools can help you diagnose and solve the issues you may be dealing with for a fraction of the cost. All you have to do is add your car to the Raise a Hood garage to get started. You can provide the AI tool, also known as Gus, with the specifics of the issues you're having, and it'll help you narrow down what the culprit is. It's a great way to bounce ideas off of to figure out what actually might be the problem. You could then select from a variety of solutions to explore the cost and difficulty of doing the repair yourself versus taking it to a shop. If your car doesn't have detailed solutions yet, that's totally fine. Just go ahead and add your car to the garage for free, and that'll let the Raise a Hood team know what to focus on as they continue to develop and grow. If you want to try out Gus or chat with a telemechanic, go to raiseahood.com and add your car to the garage to get started. Use code MONOXIDE-FREE for a 1-month free subscription, or Monoxide20 to save 20% on a 30-minute call with a telemechanic. Let's get back to the show.
Well, we've grown, and obviously now we're in a 34,000 square foot facility. I understand that Bitch and Rides, which is Dave Kindig's shop that everybody knows and talks about, they recently expanded to 34,000 square feet. So we have a 9,000 square foot facility where we do R&D and store cars, plus we have this 34,000 square foot facility. So as far as, globally with respect to square footage and number of employees, we are one of the largest, shops in the world probably. There's a couple here or there that might be bigger, but that Charger is a 70, by the way. It has a Elephant engine, 1,000 horsepower. We had a shop car, a 65 Tempest, that we campaigned for more than a decade, going to, events like LS Fest and Good Guys, and did all sorts of autocross. We would do track days at Road America. More recently, we supercharged it and really gave people fits at Road America. But we sold that car a few years ago, and we came out with a new line of Corvette chassis. So we really wanted to promote, have another vehicle to promote our chassis. And, I've owned Corvettes since 1978. So I thought, it might be time to build a Corvette as a shop car. So this 79 Corvette behind us here is a car that my friend Jack the plumber, we call him, found at a customer of his. And the guy had bought it brand new. It has 52,000 original miles. The engine ran like a top. It had been stored for 17 years. We put a battery in it. He must have put stabilizer in the fuel, and it just fired right up when we put a battery in it. It purred like a kitten. There wasn't even a drip off the oil pan. So we were going to do a small block Chevy, and I bought a bunch of AFR stuff, the good heads, 210 cc's that flow like LS flow numbers, and you can make a really high horsepower small block. So that was my goal. I was going to use the original short block to the car, put a new top end, radical cam, and all that kind of stuff. And my sales and engineering staff called me up one day, and I was not at the shop for whatever reason, and they called me on the cell and said, "Hey, what do you think about putting a Hellcat engine in the Corvette?" And they gave me the pitch that it would break the internet and so forth. And we were in the process of building a really nice Monte Carlo SS with a Hellcat engine that the customer now is enjoying. And I thought about it for about 30 seconds, and then I said, "Well, let's have a meeting about it when I get back on Monday, and we'll discuss it." But I knew then that was probably the right idea. And we like doing oddball stuff. We've done so many oddball projects over the years. My friend Mark's Gremlin that basically had the overall fastest time at the Carcraft Summer Nationals in Milwaukee in the autocross. He was beating Corvettes and Vipers and everything with a Gremlin, And, we've done a lot of oddball things all the way back to that original Cadillac that I did. So I thought a Corvette with a Hellcat engine, the Mopar people will love us, and the Corvette guys might hate us, but they'll appreciate the chassis that we put in there to handle the roughly 1,000 horsepower it'll have once we change the pulley and do a couple tweaks to it.
Who does your tuning?
Well, I've got a variety of people that do tuning. I have software here that we own. I have HP Tuner software, and I have TunerCat, and I've got a few different Holly software. But I found that, and we can do some tuning here. Like I said, we have the software on the laptop, but I've found that the guys that do tuning every single day can do it so much faster, get it done way quicker, and in the end, time is money. So I have a variety of people that do tuning for us. So some of it depends on what make and model it is. So I've got, a couple guys that do Ford stuff. I've got, a couple guys that do GM stuff, and I've got a couple guys that do Mopar stuff.
So when you look at TV shows like West Coast Customs or Overhauling and just all these shows from, the early 2000s, and I guess some of it went into the 2010s. I stopped watching TV in 2010. So how similar is that to that, right? Because, it's hard. You don't build a car in 30 minutes with commercial brakes here, I'm guessing, right? So what did realistic timelines look like? I'm sure it varies from car to car, but what does that conversation with a customer look like?
Well, there's quite a few questions there, but I've made appearances on many TV shows as guest appearances. The show Overhauling was, a show that many people grew up watching, and because it was on for a long time. So yes, they take a long time to build a car. I think that typically it takes us about 1.5 years to build a complete car with the paint and interior. And, some of them have taken 4 years. I would say on average it's probably 2 to 2.5 years to build a complete car from top to bottom. With respect to TV shows, I've done a lot of Skype interviews with various, Discovery Channel and Motor Trend and so forth about doing TV shows. A lot of TV shows, they want you to bring sponsorship to the table, and they want you to essentially pay them to have a TV show. And I have a very successful business, so I don't feel like I should have to pay them to give them content. And, so I've chosen not to do that. And I think that doing a TV show and trying to deliver a quality product to customers is very difficult. And, I'm happy doing what we're doing, quite honestly.
Well, speaking of content, we looked at your YouTube channel and stuff. You guys have been doing that. I mean, your monthly updates, all that stuff. You guys were kind of early adopters of that. Even your stuff goes way, way back.
Yeah, I think platforms like YouTube and Spotify and various different things, it gives you the freedom to actually create your own content and not really have to make a deal with some network that's basically trying to exploit what you have into profits for them. And most of the time, they want to create drama, and that can ruin families and ruin relationships with your team and things like that. So, I think that they want drama, people, conflict amongst people, and tattoos and controversy over actual getting the job done in a nice, correct fashion for the customers.
Right.
Well, that's one thing that, like, if we go back to Joe Rogan and Chris Harris's episode where they discussed it, is like nowadays you could hop on YouTube and with enough work and investment of time and resources, you could have way more views than any TV channel. I mean, that's what it's gotten to.
Yes, and that's quite interesting, but you cannot underestimate the amount of work that goes into that.
It's a full-time job.
It is a full-time job, and I know many people that have, young people that have tried to, for years to build a following on YouTube, and it really takes a lot of very hard work and probably a few miracles along the way to actually get to like 1 million subscribers.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Patience Metal Fab out of Minnesota?
I've heard of the company.
Okay.
And I watched one of your I guess it was Instagram, several of your Instagram things where you were talking to a gentleman from that company.
The reason I bring them up is so they recently, I shouldn't say recently, it's probably been like a year at this point. They hired a gentleman named Art, and he is their full-time media guy, and they've been growing their YouTube channel. I think it's up to like 20,000 subscribers or something now. And they do something very similar to you, whereas, but the one difference is they have 2 or 3 cars that they kind of take you on a journey on over the course of however long the project takes. And it's been fun to enjoy that. So when I found your channel, when we were preparing for this, I like your monthly updates. It's cool to see a car progress, and 15 cars in one video on the progress they've made. So I don't know, it just came to mind, but I definitely urge people to check that out. That is very cool.
Yeah, we enjoy doing it. We generally have between 20 and 30 cars under construction at any given time. And we do not build cars to flip. We do not build cars that you cannot build a car properly and then flip it for a profit. That doesn't exist.
No, that's a classic car thing, right? You never get out what you put into it. That's supposed to be how it works, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to make money on playing with cars. Mm-hmm. And you buy something that has a bad engine and you get it real cheap, and you put an engine in, make it run, and you sell it for the price of a running car. So there's ways of making money doing cars, but most of the things that I've seen people make money on at car auctions like, say, Mecum or Barrett-Jackson, is they do deceptive things and basically half-assed in order to make a profit. So I've seen people where they take a car and they buy it from some local guy that's had this, they go to a local cruise night and they see some cars and they try to buy a couple of them, right? And maybe a guy's got a GTO and they'll pull it apart and they'll take the engine out, pressure wash it, roll it into the paint booth and paint it with automotive paint. So the engine looks like a brand new engine that was done at a high-end shop, and then they'll detail the engine bay with some satin black, tape it off and paint the engine bay satin black, and they'll drop the engine back in, and then they'll buff the paint and shine it up a little bit, and it'll look like a freshly restored car. They'll fix maybe throw a new set of carpet in it so it doesn't smell musty, and just do a few little things like that, and then they'll bring it to an auction and mark it up 300% from what they paid, and sell it. But the unsuspecting customer looks at it and it looks freshly restored, but when you take it out back, the engine's burning oil and it's got a puddle on the ground and that kind of thing. So
holy shit,
that's how you make money at auctions, and there's so much of that going on where they're doing that kind of thing. So if you're ever buying a car at an auction, either know the car, know the history of it, or hire somebody to go look at the car and really, look it over good to see.
So,
well, you can't buy. You don't do that to flip, but it seems like I can buy a project from you in all kinds of various states of. I see a chassis over there that's got engine, transmission bolted in it. I see some other boxes of goodies. So like you offer all kinds of different levels of completion around here.
Our goal is to get the car on the road and the customer to enjoy his purchase. So if he's buying a chassis from us, we try to offer the most customer service that we can. So do you have a motor for your project or an engine? No, I don't. Well, we could, what are you thinking of putting in there? And we're set up with all the OEM manufacturers, so we can supply any engine and any transmission for any of these cars. So we offer that to our customers, and many times they prefer to do a one-stop shop. So we put the motor and trans in the chassis and ship it to them with the engine and trans. So it helps them get their project on the road sooner. And we have the expertise where if they need a fitting for a 4L80 for to adapt the transcooler line to an AN fitting, we know where to get that stuff. And we can, when they buy stuff from us, they have us as a resource to get information to finish their project.
That's cool.
To go back to like the auction side of things, have you ever had somebody purchase a car at auction and bring it to you guys because they realized it needed a ground up rebuild or anything like that?
Yeah, I've had numerous customers that bought cars at auctions or at dealers, and one of my very early customers bought a '66 Galaxy from a well-known car dealer museum in our area, and he went to jack the car up, and the jack collapsed into the frame, and upon further inspection there was newspaper stuffed into the frame and Bondo put over the frame to cover up like a skeleton of rust, excuse me. And the battery was mounted in the trunk, and the battery cable shorted out, and it almost burned the car to the ground, and he was able to get the battery disconnected, and then he went to jack it up to inspect it, and he found this problem. So we ended up locating a frame in Arizona at Desert Valley Auto Parts, a rust-free Arizona frame, shipped it back here, had it sandblasted and powder coated, and then basically transferred all his suspension and brakes from his chassis, which was in good shape, onto a solid chassis, and fixed it. But that was not a cheap date. He probably spent as much as he paid for the car to do the proper repair. I had another customer that bought a car, and he backed it out of the driveway and put it in drive, and the car wouldn't go anywhere. And someone, when they assembled the rear end, when you put an axle in a rear end, a 4.9-inch rear end, you have to rotate it, and there's 2 sets of splines in the posi unit that have to engage. And if you push it in and don't rotate it, it won't go the second step in. So when they were building the car, they must have pushed it in and couldn't get it to go in, pulled the axle out and chopped it off with a chop saw. You could see where they had chopped it with a chop saw.
Oh my God.
And then put it back in. So it was just barely engaging, and then when he backed out of the driveway and turned, it became disengaged from the spider gear, and then it wouldn't move. The car wouldn't go forward because the differential was just spinning inside, you know?
Right.
So
Wow.
we ended up having to, put new axles in it, and it had to be flatbedded, and he had just bought the thing. Also, it had engine covers that said 6.0 LS2 or maybe it was 6.2 LS3. It was either a 6 or 6.2 on the engine covers. And he said, this car doesn't feel very fast, So we got to looking, and there was a 5.3 cast into the block.
Oh,
So
no.
it said 4.8/5.3. It was a 5.3 engine that somebody had put like 6-liter engine covers on it and represented it as a 6-liter.
Wow.
So there's so many of those stories,
Oh, and one of our friends' shops, he's working on 2 auction cars. He got under it. He's like, I cannot believe how much money he paid for this thing, or how much work it needs to do, or that a shop like this can even do something like that. So obviously, we're coming up, was it 20, 21 years that you've been in business here. How have you avoided temptations or controversy over 21 years? It's not easy to do for some people, it seems, but obviously you've built a very reputable brand over time. So how did you manage to accomplish that?
Well, I always tried to look at things from a customer's perspective, and in that many years, there are some people in the world that you cannot please. Okay, and I've had a couple of those.
Mm-hmm.
But, we try to think of it from the customer perspective and try to do, the best that we can to satisfy them. We've, given people money back and said, if you don't like what we have here, when we build cars, we invoice every week. Mm-hmm. And one problem is when you're building a car and let's say you have 2 guys working on it, you rack up the hours quite quickly, and sometimes if you do like a monthly invoice, there'd be quite a large invoice at the end of the month, so we've never done that. From day one, we've invoiced every week, and we also only take advance deposits on chassis, because we have to buy a lot of products that go into the chassis, like the brakes and all that stuff. Probably on a chassis, about 75% of a chassis is purchased parts, and only 25% of it is what we manufacture. So if a customer is dissatisfied in any way, when we're building a car, we can stop it at that point, and he doesn't owe us very much money. It's, if he's paying his invoices every week, he only owes us a week, and then, he can take it somewhere else if he likes. But anyway, that we just try to do right by people. And like I said, there's been a couple that we couldn't satisfy, but, by and large, I'm real happy with our reputation.
Do you know what the most expensive build you've ever have come through here was?
Yes, we've had a couple that were approaching $500,000.
Wow.
And I'd say today, with the cost of things, our typical builds probably start about $350 to $350. We've done a couple where we didn't do any paint work at all, and they were, around $200, where we don't do paint and interior or minimal paint and interior.
Okay.
A typical Pro Touring build is usually 150 in parts, and you can reduce that a little bit by using a junkyard engine, but by and large, using junkyard parts doesn't really save you a lot. It seems like it maybe at the time, but I had a guy bring me a junkyard engine one time, and once we got looking at the engine, it had been in an accident, and the valve cover was kind of shifted. It was an LS engine. The valve cover was shifted. Well, that valve cover had shifted from an impact, and it actually broke the valve guide off in the head and bent a valve. And, you know, the engine wouldn't even turn over because the valve was locked up. So the amount of labor we ended up putting in that, we had to pull the engine apart, pull the head off, go get it, new valve guide put in it, and machining and all that. Like, he could have bought a brand new crate engine for the cost he paid for the junkyard engine, plus the labor to fix the junkyard engine. He could have bought a brand new engine.
Yeah.
And the engine he got was like, 60,000 miles or something on it. So,
Do you have a favorite crate engine right now that's on the market?
well, everybody loves the supercharged Chrysler Hemis, but the fact is they're all put in big, giant, heavy cars. So I had a Challenger Scatback for a while, and it was a great car. I loved it. I sold it because I wanted to get a Hellcat with a manual transmission, which they were reintroducing for 23. But none of my local dealers got allocations, and I ended up not getting one because of that. But imagine, those cars weighing about 4,300 pounds roughly, and imagine putting, a Schwartz G machine chassis with a Hellcat engine in, say, a Plymouth Duster. With our chassis is going to weigh, and that engine's probably going to weigh 3,300 pounds. So it's a 1,000 pounds lighter. So that's quite a performance advantage. So I think putting 700 horsepower in something light is pretty good deal. We did a few months back. It was probably about a year ago. We had a bunch of cars in here with LT5s, which was supercharged ZR1 engine, 755 horse out of the box. Typically, whatever the engine has out of the box, with a free-flowing exhaust, long tube headers, and a free-flowing air intake, they typically make 50 or 60 more horse than stock without really doing anything to them. So, a Hellcat Red Eye engine is 800 horse, and, when we get done with putting it in a car, it's probably 900 horse. And that Chevy LT5 is around 800 horse. And then we've got LT4s that is really a bargain, and we can get those around 800 horsepower. So I think all those supercharged engines are pretty good. So I would have to say, those are the best value for performance for what you pay. Personally, I like the LS7 engine a lot.
I was hoping you'd say that.
The 427, the big, the big displacement, normally aspirated, and I've not owned a car with one, so I'm in the process of building that SLC with a LS7 because I just love that. I love that engine, but you can't argue with the supercharged performance. I have a Z06 that's making 800 horsepower with the LT4, but the way the supercharged engine delivers the power, it's these OEM type superchargers are very instantaneous. So the boost builds practically right off idle, and they have a real hard time getting traction. They blow the tires off the thing and things like that. So anyway, that's one of my favorite engines. I also have an AMG, a CL63, a 2008. It's 16 years old, but it has the 6.2 liter AMG engine, and that was developed. That was the first V8 engine developed by AMG exclusively. So it's not a modified Mercedes engine. It was an engine created by AMG for the AMG cars, and I mean that thing's a ripper. It's 520 horse or something.
That's such an awesome. That's such an awesome car. I always said the Germans do V8 second best.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
That's just like Jamie's.
Oh, really?
So he has a different trim, but yeah, that's the same sort of deal, supercharged V8 sort of deal. Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, I've always said that they do it second best. Like we have a AMG GTR, and it sounds like a bat out of hell, you know.
Yeah.
But it's hard to knock that good old American muscle.
Right. Yeah.
But I did notice you have a Euro car, Mercedes over there. Are you guys starting to do more of that?
Yeah. We basically do anything the customer wants, and obviously with the popularity of Singer doing Porsches, I mean that is like a huge deal. You know, they've got a plant in LA that's ginormous where they do those cars, and they have another one in England where they're doing them cars. So it's like, yeah, there's more interest in European Restomods as well. So we have a Jag, a 64 Mark II Jag that we're doing. Yeah. That is at the upholstery shop right now. It's not here in our shop, but that has an LT1 powertrain and a one-off G-Machine chassis with independent rear suspension. That one's got the double A-arm instead of the multi-link just because of fitment issues with the back seat and wanting to have a functional back seat. The multi-link takes more space in the rear to put into a car, so there's more and more interest in Euro cars, and the only reason we did American engines in those cars is because the customers wanted, both customers have owned European cars, and they've had, you know, the experiences of dealing with, you know, Mercedes, BMW, Jaguar dealers, that the repairs are just exorbitant and crazy. So they wanted something inexpensive to maintain. So our chassis, all the replaceable components on our chassis are available at any auto parts store. You know, wheel bearings, tie rod ends, all that kind of stuff. And so by putting an American engine in there, they have that, you know, cheap maintenance, I guess.
Does every car come with a list that you're like, okay, I need this part? So you go into O'Reilly and ask them for a 64 Mustang this, or do you guys, can they order that stuff from you, or how do they know what to get?
Well, typically if someone drives their car enough to wear out a component, you know, they would call us and we could ship them the part the next day, you know.
Okay.
So that's what we normally recommend. But sometimes people are worried like, you know, well, what if you go out of business? Well, you know, we've been in business over 20 years. It's unlikely that would happen. But, you know, most of those parts, all the bearings have numbers on them. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You bring a wheel bearing into a Napa store, they look at the number and they can get you the part. You know, same thing with tie rod ends and things like that. So,
okay.
I'm curious, right? Because obviously people right now aren't spending as much money, and you've been through, you know, the 2008, 2009 sort of thing. Did that affect business at all, especially considering this is more of the hobby and leisure side of things, or not really?
Yeah, through 2008, we were in a growth period, and we were growing in double-digit growth like every year. So I didn't notice anything in 2008 as far as any type of slowdown. You know, more recently, I'd say that, you know, the last 3.5 years have been kind of strange. You know, during COVID, everybody, initially it slowed down to 0 phone calls. And then when people figured things out, then it was like the floodgates open and everybody was spending money on everything. So it was like, so it was, the phones literally stopped ringing for a couple months, and then and then the floodgates opened and we were busy like crazy. More recently, I would say the last 2 years, it's starting to decline, and fortunately, we're introducing new products, and which creates more interest and helps with that.
One of the things that we talked with one of the Restomod shops that we had on before is we're starting to notice some of these like later models catching people's attention as people that that were teenagers 20 years ago are starting to come into more money. They're starting to want to buy the stuff that they wanted. For example, like a lot of people are starting to buy up like those Gen 1 Audi R8s because of the Iron Man movie 15 years ago. Are you seeing any shift in like consumer preferences?
Yes, as the demographics shift, the market shifts with it. If you go look on any type of advertising, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, anything like that, and look up like, Model Ts and Model As, restored Model Ts and Model As, they're giving them away. They can barely give them away, I see that stuff all the time for less than $10,000, And it's because all the people that were into them cars are dead now. So as the market is shifting, street rods are soft, I think a 32 Ford is always going to be kind of an icon, you know what I mean? So because of video games and things, certain street rods might remain, Tri-5 Chevys probably might remain, but first-gen Camaros maybe. But yes, as the demographics shift, it goes to newer products. So we were the first to come out with a G-body chassis for General Motors G-body cars, and we came out with that it had to be more than a decade ago. I don't remember the exact date, but more than a decade ago we came out with that chassis, well before anybody else. And we came out with a Tri-5 chassis at the same time, and that G-body chassis outsold our Tri-5 chassis like 10-1 up until just recently. Lately, we've had a run on Tri-5 chassis now again. So, but G-bodies went all the way to 1987, and it's a cheap car that you can get into. And somebody asked me one time, well, what do you think the popularity of the G-body is? Well, one is younger demographics, but if you go to buy a 6970 Mustang to build into a pro touring car,
Yep.
you're going to spend $20,000 for a shell, where you can buy a running and driving G-body car for $6,000.
Yeah.
So the price of admission is cheaper. Same thing with a Tri-5 Chevy. You go to buy a body of that, it's going to cost you a pretty good amount of money just for the body, and you could, if you get the body for cheap, then you can have more budget to build your project. So we've get a lot of calls for Fox body stuff. At some point we'll probably have a chassis for Fox bodies. I don't right now. Square body pickups are a big thing now. So that goes all the way, I think, to 87 or somewhere around there. When did square bodies end?
That's you, Dan.
I don't know. I can tell you the Fox body's from 79 to 2004, so that's a pretty broad range.
Right.
Yeah, so when do you decide to add a chassis to your lineup? Just from phone calls? Or are you watching trends? Or
generally somebody wants one. So,
okay.
If somebody calls up and says, hey, I want a 67 Ford chassis, it's like, okay, we'll build it, So we build them a 67 Ford chassis, and then if it's a car that we think we're going to sell more of, then we'll build jigs and fixtures and have the jigs and fixture for the next customer that comes along.
So if I need one from scratch and it's not one you offer off the shelf, does that typically cost a little bit more? Or?
It does. So, typically if it's one we don't have and it's one we're probably not going to produce, it's probably going to be about $10,000 extra.
Okay.
For the engineering and one-off fabrication.
Who does your engineering for you?
We have 2 full-time engineers that work here. and we have 3D scanning capabilities. So if you have that oddball car, you ship the car to us. We put it up on a lift. We 3D scan it. We engineer the chassis for it, and it usually takes about a month to engineer the chassis, and then it's probably a couple of weeks to build the chassis. So that's how we do a one-off chassis or something that we don't have. And like I said, if it's a popular one, then we just build the jigs and then continue to make them for.
How do you do that on? So when you're talking muscle cars, easy piece of cake, right? That there was a frame on car, no big deal. But when you start getting into the unibody stuff, and you need a chassis, what are you building? Are you using parts of the actual car still, since technically the chassis is built into the car itself, or?
Well, when we pioneered the full frame for unibodies, what we wanted to do was to not add a bunch of weight to the car.
Right.
And we also wanted to stiffen it and make it stronger so that it could handle modern powertrains, because modern powertrains make way more than the old stuff did.
Yep.
And so we engineered it to where the chassis, in every application, we have to take off the front frame rails. So in the case of a Camaro or a Nova, that front subframe unbolts from the car. Mm-hmm. In the case of like a Mustang or a Mopar, that front frame rail gets cut out of the car. So we leave the core support and remove the frame rail from the core support back to the toe board of the car.
Okay.
And then all the other unibody structure remains in the car. And then our chassis runs parallel to the rear frame rails, inboard of them, and bolts to the existing unibody structure in the car.
Okay.
So on a typical unibody car, let's say a Camaro or a Mustang, the leaf springs, have you ever had a leaf spring and picked one up out of a car?
Oh, yeah.
They weigh a ton. So you got two of those leaf springs that go out of there. The cast iron steering gearbox and all the tie rods and center links and idler arm and all that stuff, that weighs a ton. So that's out of there. So a typical car with our unibody chassis in it loses about 50 to 75 pounds from its original weight. So we designed our chassis to not add weight to the car. So it stiffens it. We leave all the existing structure in there. There's one sitting in front of us here, and as you can see, that's a Mustang chassis. You see those little tubes in the rear, that goes into the forward leaf spring mount, that little tube in the back.
Oh,
there.
okay.
That goes right up into the pocket where the leaf spring is. And then we weld plates onto the toe board for these other holes to be bolted in. And all the structure is there, and this looks flimsy by itself. But when you add that to the unibody structure that's still in the car, it becomes a real robust foundation for a supercharged Coyote making 1,000 horsepower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, because on the Fox bodies, once you start adding horsepower, you can literally twist the car. I've seen where they've done that. You do a few revs and you can't even close the doors anymore.
Right, yeah.
So.
I did a Vega a number of years ago with a 5.3 in it, and it started popping spot welds.
Yeah.
So.
When it comes to like these custom chassis, how much is safety a consideration?
Well, safety is always a consideration, but when you put a modern chassis into an old car, you now have modern brakes and modern steering and all of that. So we also have ABS brakes as an option. It's about $5,000 to $6,000 extra, but we can give you an ABS system as well. So, all that stuff adds up to better safety. You've got, rack and pinion steering that responds immediately to inputs, and you've got brakes that'll stop you on a dime and give you 5 cents change.
What's going into the R&D on this stuff? Do you have like a team? Is this just your brainchild stuff? You're sitting around thinking this stuff up, or?
Well, I have a team here. So
yeah.
In the initial phases, it was just me,
yeah.
but now we have a team of people, and we all come up with ideas. And
okay.
if it's a good idea, we run with it.
Who's a competitor or shop that you kind of who do you respect out there in the industry, whether it's a competitor or shop or just even like a parts supplier even?
Well, let's just not talk about respect, but let's just talk about big players. Okay.
Okay.
So the biggest player in this realm is Roadster Shop. They've been in business roughly 50 years, and they're now no longer family owned. It's a large conglomerate. There's another company, Speed Tech. They were acquired by QA1 recently. So, we're one of the few, family-owned businesses. So, I think me starting from nothing, we end up commanding a lot of respect for what we've done. As far as others that I look up to, I have to say, what Singer has done with the Porsche market, that's just incredible, what they've done.
I got to a few episodes ago. We got to go to a shop that had a Singer there. It's actually at a car show in Minnesota today, and the entire car is just carbon fiber. I mean, just this is.
It's
I think
gorgeous.
Singers start at 400,000 or 500,000, I believe. This one was well over double that.
Yeah, I think most of the stuff that rolls out of their shop now is around $1 million usually. Because there's not really any low-end stuff anymore. That everybody wants all the goodies, check all the boxes.
Do you do a lot of stuff with carbon fiber?
We have. We have not done like a complete carbon fiber car, but we've done a lot of, carbon fenders, carbon hoods, that kind of stuff. The Mercedes has a carbon fiber insert where the sunroof was. It's a one-off molded piece that fits up into the sunroof opening and is panel bonded from the bottom, and it's exposed on the top.
1 second. I hear the sound of disappointment from our audience. Let me address this real quick. Guys, I hear you loud and clear, and you want a free sticker, don't you? I would too. They're pretty sweet. Take a second to go to monoxide.com/newsletter or click the link in the description to sign up for the free newsletter, and I'll send you one. Y'all thought I was beefing. Okay, back to the show.
Is there, speaking of newer stuff, so obviously you specialize in taking old stuff or even anything and making it perform better. Is there something now that's out that you feel performs great right out the box? Is there a certain car or something that you would be like, great, man, I wouldn't really need to touch much on this?
Well, being a car enthusiast, I'm always looking at stuff that's out there.
Right.
Some of what I do is I will, buy a car and evaluate it and compare it to what we have. Back in 2015, when the Z06 came out on the C7 platform, I bought one of those and we did extensive testing with our 65 Pontiac. And, we were within a couple hundredths on an autocross course between the two with, equal tires. So, we've done a lot of comparison data like that. Obviously, the Lamborghini STO that I raced in the Optimus series the last 2 years is a car that I admire, and the performance is pretty good out of the box. I haven't done anything to it as far as mods go. So that's one.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Mustangs, and I'm glad to see that Ford is still making Mustangs. I'm disappointed that Chevrolet is discontinuing the Camaro. The one thing that I've got to say though is all of those cars, Challengers, Mustangs, Camaros, they have gotten ginormous, gigantic. When I had my Scat Pack, I had it parked next to my 70 Thunderbird, and I took a photograph from a front view. My 70 Thunderbird looked miniature next to the Challenger. The Challenger was taller and wider and heavier, and so I think the modern car companies, modern cars, they've gotten too big and heavy. As you know, I own a Scion FRS, and I love that car. It's getting a new motor at P&L Motorsports right now, and hopefully it'll put out around 600 horsepower when I get it back. And I can't wait to run it in the Optimus Series next year in the Sport Compact class, because that thing is just such a car. When that car came out, when the Scion and the Subaru BRZ came out, that was just a phenomenal car. I was so excited about it. I went to SEMA that first year, and the whole show was just loaded with those cars, you know, with everything from Rocket Bunny wide body kits to, you know, superchargers and turbos and all that. I think the American companies have missed out on that, you know. Yeah, the Focus RS was Ford's version of a Evo or Audi RS3. I had an Audi RS3 for a while. I went down the rabbit hole of mods and ended up blowing up the engine and then building an engine and then blowing up a center diff, and you know it anyway. So
yeah, we know that rabbit hole.
So I think that American car companies should come out with an affordable rear-wheel drive small car that would allow modifications. You know what I mean? And that Scion or 86 GT they call it now, or I think it's called the 86 GT Toyota, right? So
the GR86.
Yeah, GR86. Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Now it's a GR86. It was a 80 last year. It was the 86 GT, or the year before.
I think it might have been trim or something. Yeah,
so anyway, those cars are phenomenal. They're talking about maybe putting a 3-cylinder out of the Yaris in there, but the Yaris GR. But you know, I think it'd be better off just doing a 4-cylinder if you're going to do that. But anyway, it'd be great to see a Camaro come out with a you know, an engine that's maybe hybridized or something, right? Like a turbocharged 4-cylinder with, you know, 350 horsepower and then, you know, 150 electric motor on top of it. You know, that would be kind of a cool car.
I am curious, right? Since you've driven the STO, what are your thoughts on this new Temerario coming out from Lamborghini? Have you done much digging on that one yet?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, watched the videos, you know, that kind of thing. I'm gonna have to drive one, so
right.
I'm actually set up to drive the. I'm losing my train of thought here, but the
Revuelto.
Revuelto, yeah. So I'm scheduled to drive the Revuelto next week. I was supposed to do it this week, but my schedule didn't allow it. So I'm supposed to drive that next week. So
okay.
I'm curious how a hybridized drivetrain feels like, you know. I look at it more kind of like a nitrous system, you know, that like a nitrous bottle that you don't have to fill up, but you have to charge, you know. So the idea is pretty cool. The E-Ray has really done some phenomenal quarter-mile times with that, you know, the LT2, I guess they call it, LT2 with the hybridized drivetrain. That thing really makes tracks. I'm disappointed that Lamborghini didn't keep the V10. I would have preferred if they had kept the V10, even if they made it smaller displacement. You know, it was 5.2 liter. They could have maybe took it down to 4.5 liter or something, and kept the V10 and did the hybridized thing. But I guess you know, the firing order of the flat plane and the 9,000 RPM red line might make it exciting. So I'll have to see how that does. But one of the reasons I bought the RS3 was it sounded just like a V10.
Yep.
You know,
we're all too familiar with those. Actually, our home-based studio at Ratified Motorsport, that's what they specialize in. Yesterday, we did a podcast with Rada Race Lab down not too far from here. Where are they at? Genoa?
McHenry, aren't they? Or
They
were
just
in
moved.
McHenry.
Yeah, they just moved north into Genoa.
Okay.
So they're in Wisconsin now, barely.
Genoa City.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a Genoa, Illinois.
Oh, is there? Okay.
So Genoa City. Yeah, that's close by.
Okay. Yeah, we're familiar with that platform. It's a great platform. It really is. Did you watch the Engineering Explained video on the Temerario yet, or no? About the specifics of it?
I did.
It's
I
a very
did
cool
not,
video.
but I mean, I know it's 9,000 RPM redline, and it's got some good horsepower out of that engine, and I think where they may have missed the boat though is on the pricing of it, because the base price on it is, I don't know, closing in on 200,000 more money than a base Huracan was. Okay.
Everything's just exploding nowadays.
So a base Huracan was like, a couple of years ago was like 250 or something, and now that thing, the base is 450. So you start adding carbon bits, and carbon bits on Lamborghinis are not cheap, So I'm thinking I would buy a Revuelto. Revuelto. I would buy a Revuelto probably first before I would buy that one.
Okay, because it still has the V12, right? It has that sound and all that. So the hybridization's happening at a crazy rapid pace right now. So do you find yourself excited for hybrid and electric cars then?
Yeah, somewhat. I did put a fair amount of seat time in a 296 Ferrari. So I've done a fair amount of seat time in that, and that's hybridized. And it's very seamless. You don't even know that the electric motors are there. It's just adding power kind of everywhere, I guess it fills the torque in the low end, but, it was very and you didn't notice it at all. It just felt like a very fast car, and it had a, pretty good sound to it. They've probably done the best job of making a V6 engine sound good.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is very exciting, right? Because you kind of get that instant torque. Like if you look at the torque curve, or what the torque curve will look like for the Temerario, it's just like a zip up and then flat.
Yes.
Because by the time the electric power tapers off, the turbos start kicking in. So definitely very, very exciting on that front. So will we start seeing more batteries in some of these like Restomods in the future potentially?
Yeah, I think so. The thing that concerns me a little bit about the hybridization of production cars is the cost of repair, and also the values. So, Tesla Plaids are half price right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're only a couple years old. So are hybridized cars going to do the same? You know what I mean? Because the battery life, in manufacturing, we've dealt with electric forklifts for decades. And, it loses its juice over time. And then you have to replace the battery, and the battery costs as much as a forklift. So I think that that's a concern that I have on the production cars is, are they going to have value? And then all the additional electronic devices to troubleshoot and to potentially go bad, we know how old European cars are, old BMWs and things like that with electrical issues, and old Audis, So what's it going to be like on a hybridized car when you have, twice as many wires that, to break? And the other thing that is disturbing is all these manufacturers are making their wiring harnesses with the insulation on the harness are a soy-based product. So rats and mice are getting into cars, and squirrels, and they're chewing stuff. I mean, I've heard of people having their wiring harnesses eaten 3 times, and had to bring it in, like a Chevy truck, bring into the GM dealer, and they have to replace the harness at, $3,000 3 times, and that kind of stuff. So, sometimes we try to be green, and then we screw ourselves by, now the squirrels have a tasty thing. I had a chipmunk get in my garage the other day, and I had the STO and a Maserati MC20 in there, and it disappeared, and I couldn't find it for like 2 days. It was in there for 2 days. Finally, I got it out of the garage, but I pray that it didn't chew on anything. But it literally went up inside the car. I saw it go under the car. I looked under the car, and it was not visible. So, that's
a little nerve-wracking.
That's a little nerve-wracking. So with respect to hybridizing these cars, I would have the same concerns of the OEM things where, more things to go wrong. So a lot of requests we have are being able to do things with your car from your cell phone, and we've integrated that type of stuff into these cars. But it's not without potential problems, Same thing with push-button starts, In the old days, you had like a push button on the floor, and you'd put your foot on it, and it would actually start the car. I don't know if you've ever seen a car that old, but like
no, 50s, but I have
50 Chevys pickups have a push button on the floor. You just push down with your foot for the starter.
Oh, really? I have done the brights with the foot, but I've not had to start the car from that way.
Right.
So,
but anyway, now we have to do a push button start. We got to push the button, and then it trips a relay, which trips something else, and then it starts the car. But most of the time they have a key fob attached, and you got to unlock the key fob, and then you got to do it all in sequence. And if you do it out of sequence, it won't start. And so I just love having a key that you turn to start it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things where like you can do it, but it does add complexity.
Right, and potential maintenance issues down the road. So, we'll see how that all shakes out. We're willing to do anything the customer wants. So if they want to electrify, they want to add that as a power booster, we'll certainly try to do it, whatever we can do.
I want to talk about these like land speed record, or just these records in general that you're doing, especially when you, again, talk about the FRS or the 86 platform. I mean, what made you choose to go down that route? What are some of the accomplishments you've done with that?
Well, for many years, I've known of this organization called East Coast Timing Association, and they started way back when doing events at Maxton Air Base in North Carolina. And it was an old air base, and they would do events there. And everybody knows the Southern California Timing Association, which puts on events at Bonneville. Mm-hmm. But as I've gotten older, I try to minimize my risks, and to me, driving flat out on essentially a dirt road, which is Bonneville, is kind of silly as far as the risk factor goes.
We've had people tell us that experience is it's off-putting because it almost gets a little
right.
You have
almost.
To, you have to just have faith in God you're not going to die.
Right.
And just keep it hammered down. And you also have to gingerly apply the throttle so you don't kill yourself. But when I heard about this East Coast Timing Association, I said, air base, now that's a place to go fast in a car. You got lots of space and things like that, So for many years I'd thought about doing it, and then more recently they started doing events in Blytheville, Arkansas, and there's an old B-17 bomber training facility in Blytheville, Arkansas that's got a 14,000-foot runway, and which is, I guess, 5,200 feet to a mile, right? So it's like 2 3/4 mile long. And so they set up a course 1.25 miles, which is 2 kilometers. And then they time you at the half mile, the 1 mile, and the 2K. So every pass, you have the potential to break 3 records. And I didn't realize it until I went there, but I went there with my Ducati 1299R Final Edition. It's a twin-cylinder motorcycle, all factory stock except the factory race exhaust and the race ECU. And I was planning on going with my Scion FRS, but there was some driveline vibration issues that I was working through after my 300ZX trans swap happened. So it wasn't ready. So I took my 599 GTB Ferrari as a substitute car, and I figured I could probably break a couple 12-cylinder records and motorcycle twin-cylinder records. So I had kind of a mission of setting a record in the car and a record in the bike. But when I got there, I kind of figured out how the whole thing worked, and then they told me that you can run higher displacement categories with your vehicle. The rules are, X amount of cc's or cubic inches, and is your maximum for that class, but you can go up. You just can't go over the displacement rules. So in the case of the Ferrari, it was a 6-liter. It was 5.99 liters, So I ran the up to 6-liter class, and then I did all the various classes that they had. I think 10-liter was the biggest class that they had.
God.
So these are for guys that are using those Allison aircraft engines that were 12 cylinders and things like that, that they have these different categories for displacement.
Yep.
So basically, I broke all the 12-cylinder records, half mile, 1 mile, and 2 kilometers. I was able to break every record. And then the motorcycle, it was kind of the same thing. That bike makes 198 horsepower at the rear wheel, and it's 237 at the crank. It's got titanium rods and valves from the factory. And so I broke all the records with that, with the bike. So I think it was something like 63 records or something the first time. I also, with the twin cylinder, you could also run 4-cylinder classes. So I actually broke a few records in the 4-cylinder class with the twin cylinder as well. Some Hayabusa records, actually.
And then, again, just because I'm so intrigued by this, where did the love for the FRS come from? Because I hear from so many people that it's just an amazing chassis overall.
Well, like I said, when I first saw the car at SEMA, it's a low-cost, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, a low-cost front-engine rear-wheel drive car. And I mean, that's what everybody wants in a performance car, is you want a rear-wheel drive car that's, inexpensive. So I just thought it was a great idea, great platform. And in the light of everything becoming so big and bulky, everybody knows how much a Miata handles, but that FRS has, like, even in stock form, a little over 200 horsepower compared to what a Miata had back at that time that it came out, was the Scion is just a great car. I mean, ergonomically, when you sit in it, when I sat in it for the first time, like, you just close your eyes and reach your hands out, and the steering wheel is right where it's supposed to be. Your head is just lightly touching the headrest. It is the most ergonomically perfect car, at least for my body. I just fit perfectly in it, and I'm about 6'1" and 190 pounds, and I just fit perfectly in that car. It just it's good looking. It's got good lines, styled good, high quality. I don't know what's not to like. I guess it is a little weird because I'm an old guy that grew up on American cars, and but back in my history, I did race 2 different Renaults in IMSA series, and then I also in SCCA, the 5 national track records that I broke were in a Chevy Citation X11 front-wheel drive sport compact car. So I do have some history with sport compact cars.
Yeah, it's just with a guy that has access to the caliber of cars you have access to, it's an oddball in your collection. That's why I think that's what.
Well, I've owned 2 Evos as well. So
okay.
I've had 2 Evos, and the first generation that they brought to this country. You know, what was that called? Was that a
Was it the 4?
4? I think. Yeah, I think it was the Evo 4, and then a final edition. I had a gray final edition that I brought over to AMS and had them do their package on it.
Well, funny story, how we, and I don't know if Harris told you, but how we came across you was that we ran into a gentleman that used to own an Evo at a Dunkin' Donuts, and he's the one that told us to come shake your tree.
Okay, yeah, that was my friend Sean. I heard
Okay.
from him this morning, and he mentioned that he had bumped into you guys. So, you know, thank you, Sean, for hooking us
absolutely.
up. But,
It's such a funny story though, because like he was wearing his Optima shirt yesterday, and then Sean just was like Road America or whatever it was,
Yeah.
you know, and just got to chatting, and I didn't even realize that you guys were based this far north. I had no idea where I thought you were based out of, but it just kind of one of those like happy little coincidences that just kind of worked out.
well, we used to go to the Carcraft Summer Nationals all the time in Minnesota at the state fairgrounds, because that's kind of like my homeland. So I always felt like I wanted to go there. When I before I started my business as an enthusiast, I used to go to that Carcraft Summer Nationals. Now they call it Street Machine Nationals. It still exists up there.
Yep.
And then I've gone to back to the 50s a few times, and you know, Minnesota has a gigantic car culture, you know, because, you know, it seems like everybody's mechanically inclined because they still have shop classes in high schools up there, and people learn how to do things at a young age, and people build stuff in their garage, and, you know, it's like really great car culture up there. But in 2013 and 2017, the readers of Carcraft magazine voted Schwartz Performance as the Pro Builder of the Year. So, so we do have some, you know, claim to fame, I guess you'd say. But, you know, lately we've just been concentrating on keeping our customers happy and building, you know, cool stuff for everybody and getting it out there so people can enjoy it.
Well,
Definitely.
I think this is a reoccurring theme that we're starting to see on the show is your work does your talking for you, right? You know, so if you end up in a magazine or end up getting invited to some, you know, crazy national show, I think it's usually just because of your work. Are you starting to notice that as well? I mean, have you noticed that over the years?
Yeah, I have noticed that, yeah. Yeah, and every time I bring a car out in public that we've built, there's always a lot of, you know, compliments, and people are, you know, shocked by the high-end quality.
Mm-hmm. What about the Superlight? We kind of glazed over it earlier this episode, but what's the plan with that car?
Well, in my younger days, 22 years ago, I had owned a lot of Corvettes at the time, and obviously I love road racing and track driving and that kind of thing, and sports cars. I've always liked a luxury car ride, but a sports car handling, and we've pretty much done that with our chassis with, you know, low friction, you know, bearings and long travel shocks and that kind of thing. But I always liked a car that rode good and handled good, and there was a period where I went through, you know, Corvettes, and I got to a point like, where do I go from owning a Corvette? What's the next step? So I learned about a car called Ultima GTR, and made in the UK. It's a self-assembly supercar, and I sold a bunch of stuff and gathered enough money to get a deposit on one. I visited the factory in England in 2002, and I built one of the first LS-powered Ultima GTRs. And then later on, I twin-turboed it. I took it out to the Silver State Classic and won the 0 to 200 to 0 event. I beat the big red Camaro that everybody is in love with. And I put 50,000 miles on that Ultima GTR. Drove it on Hot Rod Power Tour, drove it everywhere. So that was my first supercar. And now I've been able to move on to store-bought supercars, and I've had a few of those over the years. But back to returning to my roots, the Ultima GTR was kind of my roots. I built it in my garage before I owned the business. And after I had that car for a little while, I discovered another car that wasn't available at the time I ordered it, called the SLC. And I ended up being in Michigan, I think on Hot Rod Power Tour one year with my Ultima GTR. And I went over to Race Car Replicas, who builds the SLCs. And I met Fran Hall, the man behind that company. And he gave me a tour and showed me the products. And I was really impressed with it. And it was kind of like, damn, I wish I had known about this before, but I don't believe it was available at the time I ordered the Ultima, but whatever. So now fast forward, I have one here and I'm planning on building it for myself. Initially I was going to go crazy twin turbo horsepower with, like 1,500 at the crank and 1,200 at the wheel or something like that. But I'm thinking this one has a Hewland sequential gearbox, and I think that I should be building it more for like fast lap times. And I don't think 1,500 horsepower is going to get me the fastest lap time. I think it may get bragging rights at the Cars and Coffee event, but I think I would rather have something function than be something to brag about. So I've decided to do the LS7 engine, one of my favorite engines, and I think I can get around 800 normally aspirated horse with the CNC ported Lingenfelter heads that I have and the camshaft that I have. So I'm hoping to assemble that. The rotating assembly is being balanced right now. I've got like 14-to-1 compression pistons and H-beam rods and a forged crank, and it's going to be a dry sump oiling system and all that. So that stuff's at the machine shop. The blocks being line board and decked, and I'm going to start assembling that hopefully next week or two.
Oh wow!
How much wrenching are you still doing when it comes to your own cars? Are you doing? Are you still in the shop? Or?
So I that's a tricky question. I'm busy with so many things. I don't have that much time to dedicate to everything, but I have a pretty good team here, and sometimes I'm able to leave a little early on a weekday and go to the other shop, is where I work on my stuff. So
okay,
we call it our R&D facility, but it's got a lift there. We do like 3D scanning of cars there for design work and stuff, and we store customer cars there as well as some of our my fleet of toys and things. So so I've got a 50 Studebaker there that was my purchased brand new by my two great uncles that lived in North Home, Minnesota, and they bought the car from Erickson's Garage in Kellyher, Minnesota in the fall of 49. It was a brand new 1950 Studebaker Champion. So I acquired it from my second cousin Ray up on the Iron Range. I forget what the town is, but he gifted it to me with the promise that I restore it and do something with it. So the bottom of the car was rotted off of it, so we built a chassis and did that. The car is now painted. I recently fitted new glass to all the mechanism that rolls the windows up and down, the channels, and it's got it's painted. The windshield is in it. The headliner's in it. The seats are in it. I did an LS engine that I disguised as a Studebaker V8. So it's got Studebaker valve covers, air cleaner, oil filler, and I'm working on that. I'm working on wiring. The lights are wired. I have to wire the air conditioning, wire the dash, put the engine wiring harness in, and put the glass in the window. So, and then it's got to go to the interior shop to get finished up. But that one I'm working on. I recently finished a 73 Vet that a friend of mine built years ago, was stored in a barn for 40 years. Convinced him to sell it to me. I resurrected it. He had done all sorts of chassis mods, so I didn't put a chassis in it. I didn't want to destroy the stuff that he had done. And it's a wide body flared fender 73. I subcontracted the fender flares and the paint. I put the engine in, put the trans in, adjusted the valves, assembled the engine. I had a Corvette shop do some of the assembly of the interior pieces. And so I work on the stuff that I'm building. I always try to do most of that work myself. This SLC, I've got one of my guys fitting the doors, the hinging of the doors. So one door is hinged, the other one he's got to finish up. And I put the engine in it the other day for mock-up purposes. This TR7 that I've got here that I'm doing an LS swap on probably is something that I'll do myself. I'm going to put the engine and trans in that probably in the next month or so, and then I'll move it to the other shop. I'll finish up the Studebaker. I've got a C10 truck there that's all fabricated. I just have to make sure that I mount the ECU and a few other things, and then that's ready to be painted. So I work on a lot of my stuff, but I've got too much stuff to do all of it. So my friend Pete at Lake Barrington Motorsports does some stuff for me he usually has 2 cars at any given time. Right now he's got my 924 Porsche D-Production Vintage Road Racer that I have yet to drive. It's running and driving now, and we're just finishing up the details. I hope to have that at some of the vintage races next summer. And then I recently tracked down 2 Corvettes that I bought brand new, an 84 and a 96, and they were almost the same shape as when I sold them, believe it or not, many years ago. And the 96 Vet is getting a cam put in it, and valve springs, and headers, long tube headers and stuff. So I have others working on my stuff. I rarely have people here working on my stuff because they're working on customer stuff, and if they work on my stuff, I lose the income of the customer stuff. Plus I'm paying them whatever they're making per hour. So I'm better off having my stuff done off-site if I can't do it myself. So
Okay. Is there an aspect to working on cars that you absolutely hate? It's like some guys hate wiring, some guys hate messing with carburetors. Is there any one part that just you're like, I just really don't want to do that?
Well, probably putting the window mechanism back in the doors is one that I've been dragging my feet on a little bit lately. Wiring, I quite enjoyed doing the wiring of the lights. I put weather pack connectors on everything, and so I enjoyed doing that. When I first started in the business, I dreaded wiring, but now it's just you just start at one end and just start doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you just put the connectors on and start doing it, and then it's not as difficult as what it seems. It's relatively clean work, wiring, so I really don't mind that. I really don't like working on greasy, oily things and fixing oil leaks,
Yeah.
like pulling an oil pan off and changing the oil pan gasket or fixing a rear main seal. That's the kind of stuff that I dread doing, and I don't think I ever want to do that again, actually.
So as we start to wind down here, because we are closing in on 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Time flies when you're having fun. Before we do our usual Minnesota goodbye, where do you see things going? What do the next few years look like for you? What are some exciting things in your future that you're looking forward to?
Well, we are currently manufacturing Jeep chassis, private label for a company, Attitude Performance, and I think they're Arlington Heights, Illinois. So we're doing Jeep chassis for them. They're going to be using a body out of Canada to put on these Jeep chassis, a reproduction body out of Canada. So it's like an off-road Jeep with a really trick suspension setup on it. And then we're in the design stages of an off-road pre-runner chassis for square bodies and Ford F-100s. From the F-100 will be like 68 to, I don't know, 80, 79 or 80 or whatever that body style goes, and then the square bodies are 76 to, I think they're 90. No, 90 is in the, probably 87, I think it is, for the square bodies. But anyway, it's a pre-runner chassis. So right now, I'm not aware of any product on the market that's a pre-runner 2-wheel drive, tall, long travel suspension chassis. So I think around the Midwest, a lot of people want jacked up trucks. They want like the smooth ride that you get with the, Raptor and T-Rex trucks with that off-road suspension that gives very compliant ride, because we have frost and potholes and winters that we deal with that ruin the roads around here. And most people don't take their trucks and go, around these parts, the Midwest, upper Midwest, don't really go rock crawling and climbing a lot of hills and things, So if we build this chassis, I think it'd be give people an opportunity to not replacing a rusted out chassis. Number one is a benefit of it, or building something with a brand new chassis that with all the suspension on it that'll save you time on your build, give you the smooth ride. You can take it out into a plowed field and just go blasting off road across a bumpy plowed field and impress your buddies. But it doesn't have the expense of that extra differential in the front, and it'll handle and drive better because you're not fighting the front wheels trying to push the front end. You know how it is driving a 4-wheel drive truck in 4-wheel drive when you're trying to turn, right?
Yep.
So I just think that it's going to be a new market segment for us. So I'm really excited about that, and we are doing a 68 Firebird project, which is electrification. So we're well underway on the engineering of the chassis for that. I hope to have that chassis done within the next few months. And this Corvette should be running and driving by the end of the year. And the rendering is up there. That'll be a wrap that'll be put on the car.
Oh, so you're going to wrap it instead of paint it?
Yes. Painting has gotten so ridiculously expensive. I don't even know what to say about it other than, I hate how expensive it is, But,
that'll look good. I mean, that'll represent the shop well.
So we wanted kind of patriotic theme.
Yeah.
So red, white, and blue. And then we kind of did the slash 3 different colors, which is what AMC did with their race cars.
Yeah.
All the AMCs had that paint scheme on them, but we changed the order of the colors around from what the AMC had. And then we got the Hellcat engine in there. So, I don't know.
Can't get much more American than that.
Well, we're going to... the AMC guys will either love or hate the paint shop, so...
So, like, how, like, the C6 ZR1s, they have, like, that kind of glass hood. Are you going to do that sort of deal here, too, or no?
We're using the stock fiberglass hood, the one sitting there with the...
You're just going to leave the hole in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was curious what you were going to do with that, because I saw it in the video.
We thought about doing the clear Lexan shield like the C6 ZR1 had, but at this point, it could end up happening. We've had that discussion, but I think for the time being, we just want to get the car done and do it. And the other thought is we've got this ginormous splitter on the front, and we've opened up the airflow to the front of the car to cool the intercooler heat exchanger as well as the radiator, because we're planning on having this in near 1,000 horsepower tune. So we've got a bigger crank pulley for it and so forth. So we need a lot of airflow. The hole being in the hood will actually help relieve the underhood pressure. People put louvers on the sides of the hood and in the fenders, and I can't rule out that we may put some louvers there as well. But I think if we close off that opening, it's going to have a performance disadvantage. Leaving it open will allow some of that air to exit.
That's what the newer Shelby GT500s, they have a rain tray you take out for track use, They said it's not to cool the engine bay; it's actually for aerodynamics.
Yes, yeah.
So
exactly.
Which, going back to your off-road stuff too, by the way, that is an exploding market. I mean, it's even Shelby, when I was down there talking to them, they sell 70% more trucks than they're doing cars between their Bajas and their Shelby trucks. So
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we have a friend that knows all too much about overheating C6 CR1s.
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
So, anyways, Dan, do you want to pop the usual 3?
Sure. At the end of every episode, we like to ask our guest, which this is going to be a mind-blowing one here. We like to ask our guests to pick 3 cars, a daily driver, a track car, and a show car. You can build whatever you want, swap whatever you want, a limited budget. I know a guy who already has probably a bunch of cars. This is going to be a difficult one, but
That's going to be difficult, but for winter, we really need 4 cars when we're in the Midwest here.
Yeah.
Because we need a winter daily and we need a summer daily.
yeah.
Those are 2 different cars, right?
I'm the tough guy, though. I usually I force people into the little box to one daily.
Okay. All right.
So
well,
your daily
tough.
has to be
well, my
winter.
winter
and-
daily is a Ram 2500 with the Cummins that's been tuned. So that's my winter or inclement weather. So I drive that in the summer when it's raining and so forth. So I guess that's going to qualify as the daily driver. Okay.
Okay.
And now, just because I'm curious, not that it's gonna count for our rules, but what would the summer daily be? I'm curious. If you were to pick one.
Well, I drive a different car each day when
Fair
it's
enough.
sunny out. So CL63 AMG, the 73 Vet with the big block, the 84 Corvette, the 96 Corvette.
Nice rotation.
I normally don't drive supercars to work,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, just about anything.
Okay.
C8, you know.
All right. So then track and show.
Track, I have a car in a box over there. So you notice that next to the Studebaker that's on the lift above the Mustang,
Yep.
there's a crate next to that Studebaker. Okay. And I had a guy in Bulgaria build me a body that is a Bentley Speed 8.
That's like, wait, so Speed 8.
The Le Mans winning race car
Okay.
from like 2005.
Oh, okay. Okay, I know what you're talking about. I
The
used to do
Bentley
that.
boys, they went back to Le Mans for the anniversary of Bentley.
Yeah.
And they won Le Mans. It took them 2 years, but the second year they won.
Yeah, I think Carwow did a video on that, like where they they drag race against the modern Formula
Yes.
1 car. That one, right? I love
Yes.
that car in video games.
Right. So the Bentley Speed 8. So I have a Bentley Speed 8 body there, and I am building a chassis for that and building that into a complete car. It'll be a street legal track car.
Holy shit.
And I'm painting it exactly like the Speed 8 that won Le Mans.
So like that, it's not British racing green, but it's like a variation of it or something, isn't it?
It is, yes. It's British, like a British green and silver.
Holy shit, dude. I don't think you understand. That is probably one of the coolest ones that we've heard on
Yeah?
this show.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
And
excited.
I have a photo of it I can show you, all right? So
Okay.
I have it on my phone. I'll show you a photo of that.
Okay.
But so that is the track car that is my ultimate track car that I hope to build before I die.
What
You
do you
know,
got
we are. I got to interject this. Okay, we are all dying. Okay,
Yeah.
we just don't know when. Okay, and so many people waste time playing online games and surfing the internet and all that. You need to understand that we are all dying. Every one of you listening, you are all dying. Okay, so get out there and do something while you still can. As you get older, you start realizing it more. But since my father died as an infant, my whole life I've been living life like there's no tomorrow. He got ill one day and died at 22, okay, from polio. He was sick for a week and then gone. So we've seen with this COVID stuff, people dying, young people, whatever. So, these dream cars we're talking about, try to get out there and do it, and sitting behind a computer, wasting time on, Facebook and that kind of stuff, I mean, I'm on there myself, and I'm guilty of wasting time.
Yep,
but but we got to try to minimize that because we are all dying. So let's go out and do some fun stuff. So the Bentley is the track car, and
What are you gonna put in there for an engine?
well, it was twin turbocharged originally, so I have to. They were using an Audi-based 4-liter V8 with twin turbos.
Okay.
So I've got to twin turbo it. So I'm not quite sure on what engine I'm going to put in there. So I have one of the limitations is the cockpit of that, not the cockpit of that car, but the body design of the car. The rear engine cover comes off the cockpit and goes down at a pretty steep angle.
Mm-hmm.
And the engine bay is very short. And the back of the car is very low, just
Yeah.
above the transaxle. So the engine is limited on the front to back dimension, and the Audi V8 is one of the shortest V8s front to back.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm unsure on the engine. I have two possibilities. Well, I have multiple possibilities,
Yeah.
but I would like to put a V8 in there so it sounds like the original because it had the Audi V8. So I have a dry sump LT1 that I'm going to mock up and see if that'll fit.
Mm-hmm.
It may be too long front to rear. I also have a V6 engine. So not many people know this, but when the LS came out in 97 and then they put it in trucks in 98 or 99, they never updated the truck V6. The 4.3 liter truck V6 was an old iron block 350 with 2 cylinders lopped off essentially. When the LT came out, they finally updated the V6 and they took the LT engine and chopped 2 cylinders off and bored it out to 4.3. So it's like a 350 cube LT1 with 2 cylinders less. It puts out 300 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque in stock trim. So I have one of those, and if I cannot fit the V8, I may end up putting that V6 and twin turboing it for space constraints. Or the other thought is just to put an Audi V8 in it. So those are kind of the three.
You have a lot of options for that.
Choices.
That'll be interesting to see.
The transaxle, I have a whole rear suspension assembly and transaxle from a C7. So the C7 had a rear-mounted transaxle.
With the whole torque tube and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I can do is take the truck bell housing, which is a removable bell housing from the transmission. It's the same transmission in the Corvette, the 8-speed, that was in the trucks, but it's paddle shifted, programmable, more. It feels like a PDK actually when you drive it. So I'm planning on taking the torque tube off and machining this bell housing to mate to the transaxle, so I can bolt the transaxle directly to the engine.
Right.
And this Bentley body requires the output of the transaxle, the CV axle shafts, to be very far away from the engine. So the Corvette is that way. The Corvette transaxle of the C7, the axle output is quite a ways away from where the torque tube bolts on. So when I put the bell housing on there, the dimension will be correct to fit the body of the car. If I put a Hewland sequential in there, then I need to add spacers and make custom input shafts that are longer to get the trans back far enough to line up with the fender openings.
That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
What's before we get to show car? What are you thinking timeline for that whole thing? I mean, that sounds like a pretty heavy project to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch of projects in process.
There's that too.
That'll probably take me 3 or 4 years to finish up, and then hopefully that one will be the next one.
Okay. And then what about show car?
The latest Pagani.
Okay. The Utopia?
Yeah.
Okay.
The manual trans one.
Okay. Would you do any track version or just whatever the latest one is?
Well, it's kind of that latest one is a manual transmission, and it's kind of a all of their cars are kind of track focused,
True.
track capable. But I'm hoping to meet him next week in in Italy.
Okay.
So I'm visiting the Pagani factory next week after next.
Okay.
So Ducati's building me a special one-of-one V4R motorcycle, and they're unveiling it at the Ducati factory to me next week after next on the 26th.
Oh,
So that
cool.
week of the 23rd, I'm going to visit Pagani and take a look at what they do. But I love the idea of the V8, the V12. All his cars are V12, and he says I'm not going to do hybrids, because my customers don't want it. So his philosophy is and mindset is what I share.
A man of taste.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Well, Jeff E. Schwartz on Instagram and schwartzperformance.com. Schwartz Perf is our Instagram for Schwartz.
Mm-hmm.
And Schwartz Performance is our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Dan?
You can find us at Gun It Garage with 2 N's.
And as if for everybody else, you've made it this far into the episode, so you found us. Congratulations. Jeff, thank you so much for making this happen. I'm glad we were able to sit down and chat. Dan, thanks for existing, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.